Hi guys, I'm Victoria from the Gampaha Medical Student Association, and this video is about the role of human endocrine system. Today we'll be talking about the human endocrine system, glands related to human endocrine system, some hormones and their functions, the feedback mechanisms related to the endocrine system, and some endocrine disorders in humans. First of all, let me give you a brief introduction about coordination and regulation in the human body. Now there are two basic systems for coordination and regulation of activities in the human body, which are the nervous system and the endocrine system. The endocrine control is mainly involved in slower but more precise adjustments in maintaining homeostasis in the body. The endocrine system functions through chemical signaling by hormones which are secreted by specific endocrine glands or endocrine cells into blood. Therefore, the blood circulatory system is directly involved with the endocrine system. Now, let's move to a comparison between the nervous and endocrine coordination. So, as you can see, in nervous coordination, signals transmit through neurons, while in hormonal coordination, signals transmit through blood. We can find chemical as well as electrical transmitters in nervous coordination, but in hormonal coordination, we can only find chemical transmitters, which are hormones secreted by specific endocrine glands or endocrine cells. Nervous coordination shows localized response, while hormonal coordination shows diffuse response. And the nervous coordination is faster, while hormonal coordination shows slower response. The duration of the response in nervous coordination is short, but the duration of the response in hormonal coordination is long. What are endocrine glands? Endocrine glands are ductless glands consisting of groups of specialized cells which secrete hormones, which are chemical messengers, that diffuse directly into the bloodstream and reach the specific target organ or tissues that may be located quite distantly. Now, you need to by heart this definition because you cannot drop a single point if you want to get full marks for the definition. So, let me repeat you this definition once again. Endocrine glands are ductless glands consisting of groups of specialized cells which secrete hormones that diffuse directly into the bloodstream and reach the specific target organ or tissues that may be located quite distantly. These glands are surrounded by extensive capillary networks. This facilitates the diffusion of hormones from the endocrine glands to the bloodstream. So, what is a hormone? A hormone is a specific type of signaling molecule secreted by an endocrine gland or endocrine cell and travels in the blood and acts on specific target cells elsewhere in the body, changing the target cell functioning. So let me repeat you this definition once again because you need to by heart it. So a hormone is a specific type of signaling molecule secreted by an endocrine gland or endocrine cell and travels in the blood and acts on specific target cells elsewhere in the body, changing the target cell functioning. Although a specific hormone can reach all body cells, only the cells which have mature receptors for that hormone are responsive to the chemical signal, as you can see in this image. When the hormone binds to the specific receptor of the target cell, it acts as a switch influencing chemical metabolic reactions within the cell. Through chemical signals, hormones can communicate regulatory messages throughout the body. The human endocrine system mainly consists of specific endocrine glands that are widely separated from each other. I'll show you the location of these endocrine glands in the next slide. But let me introduce you the endocrine glands in the human endocrine system, which are the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, pineal gland, which are found in the human brain. Then comes the thyroid gland and the parathyroid glands, which are found in the neck. The thymus gland, which is found in the thoracic cavity. Then the adrenal glands and islets of Langerhans in the pancreas and the gonads. Now, let's see where the glands are located. So, the hypothalamus is located at the base of the forebrain, just below the thalamus and connected to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland too is located at the base of the forebrain, as you can see just below the hypothalamus, to which it's attached by a stalk, which you will see clearly as we move on. The pineal gland too is found in the brain. The thyroid and parathyroid glands are located in the neck, just below the larynx and in front of the trachea. The parathyroid glands are actually located in the posterior surface of the thyroid gland. The thymus, which is not in this diagram, is located in the upper part of the chest, directly behind the sternum and between the lungs. The adrenal glands lie superior to each kidney. The islets of Langerhans are found inside the pancreas. The female gonads are found in the pelvic cavity, while male gonads are found inside the scrotum. In addition to these endocrine glands, isolated endocrine cells are found in some organs and tissues such as the stomach, the small intestine and the kidneys. These isolated endocrine cells secrete specific hormones. For an example, isolated endocrine cells in the stomach, as you can see in this image, secrete the hormone gastrin. Now let's move to the endocrine glands found in the human brain, which are the hypothalamus, pituitary and the pineal gland. Let's talk about the hypothalamus first. The hypothalamus is located at the base of the forebrain, just below the thalamus and connected to the pituitary gland. Seven hormones are produced and released by the hypothalamus, which act on the anterior pituitary. This means that the target site of these hormones is the anterior pituitary. Now, these hormones are of two types, which are named releasing hormones and release inhibiting hormones. Releasing hormones are the hormones which trigger the release of a specific hormone from anterior pituitary gland, while the release inhibiting hormone inhibits the release of a specific hormone from the anterior pituitary. Now there are 5 releasing hormones, namely GHRH, which stands for growth hormone releasing hormone, TRH, which stands for thyrotrophin releasing hormone, CRH, which stands for corticotrophin releasing hormone, GnRH, which is the abbreviation for gonadotrophin releasing hormone, and PRH, which stands for prolactin releasing hormone. There are two releasing inhibiting hormones secreted by this hypothalamus, which are PIH, which stands for prolactin inhibiting hormone, and GHRIH, which stands for growth hormone releasing inhibiting hormone. These hypothalamic hormones regulate the secretion of anterior pituitary hormones. Two other hormones produced by the hypothalamus are oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone, and they are stored in the posterior pituitary until they are released into the bloodstream and act on specific target sites. Now let's take a look at the hypothalamic hormones and their function. Now I'll tell you a trick to remember this information in these tables. It's quite easy. You just need to remember that releasing hormones stimulate the secretion of a specific hormone from the anterior pituitary, while the release inhibiting hormones simply inhibit the secretion of a specific hormone from the anterior pituitary. Now keeping that point in mind, let's read this table together. So GHRH stimulates the secretion of growth hormone from anterior pituitary. TRH stimulates the secretion of thyroid stimulating hormone from anterior pituitary. CRH stimulates the secretion of adrenocorticotropic hormone from anterior pituitary. GnRH stimulates the secretion of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone from anterior pituitary. Prolactin releasing hormone stimulates the secretion of prolactin hormone from anterior pituitary. Here are the release inhibiting hormones. Prolactin inhibiting hormone inhibits the secretion of prolactin hormone from the anterior pituitary. And growth hormone release inhibiting hormone inhibits the secretion of the growth hormone and thyroid stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary. Now let's move to the next endocrine gland in the brain, which is the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is situated in the forebrain just below the hypothalamus, to which it is attached by a stalk. Pituitary gland consists of two main parts, which are the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary, which are actually two fused glands that perform different functions. The anterior pituitary connects with the hypothalamus through the portal blood vessels, as you can see in this image. The anterior pituitary synthesizes specific hormones. Now that's a major difference between the posterior pituitary and the anterior pituitary, because the posterior pituitary gland does not synthesize any hormone. So keep this point in mind thoroughly. In response to specific releasing hormones secreted from the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary secretes specific hormones to the bloodstream. 6 hormones synthesized and released by anterior pituitary are categorized as trophic hormones and non-trophic hormones according to their function. Now, trophic hormones are the hormones secreted by the anterior pituitary which redirect the chemical signals from hypothalamus to other endocrine glands. This means that the target site of these trophic hormones is another endocrine gland or an endocrine cell. So, you can understand what's a non-trophic hormone now. They simply target non-endocrine tissues and cells. There are 4 trophic hormones, which are the TSH, which stands for thyroid stimulating hormone, ACTH, which is the abbreviation for adrenocorticotropic hormone, FSH, which means follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, which stands for luteinizing hormone. The thyroid stimulating hormone targets the thyroid, which stimulates the secretion of thyroid hormones, which are the trihydrothyronine and thyroxine hormones, which we'll be talk later, and stimulates the growth of thyroid gland. The adrenocorticotropic hormone targets the adrenal cortex, stimulating the secretion of adrenal cortex hormones. We'll talk about these hormones in detail later. The follicle stimulating hormone acts on ovaries in females and on testes in males. In females, this hormone stimulates the growth and development of ovarian follicles, while in males, it stimulates spermatogenesis. The luteinizing hormone acts ovaries in female and testes in males. But the difference of this hormone and FSH is that LH involves in ovulation, promotes formation of the corpus luteum in the ovary, which is a structure formed after ovulation, which will be taught later, and stimulates progesterone hormone secretion by the corpus luteum, while in males it stimulates the secretion of testosterone hormone. So prolactin is a non-trophic hormone, and the growth hormone is a hormone with trophic as well as non-trophic effects, which means it acts on endocrine glands and endocrine cells as well as non-endocrine glands and non-endocrine cells. And remember that growth hormone is the most abundant hormone synthesized by the anterior pituitary. So, the growth hormone targets all body cells, promoting the tissue growth, especially bones and muscles, by stimulating protein synthesis and regulates metabolism. Prolactin acts on mammary glands, stimulating milk production, together with other hormones promoting milk secretion by the mammary glands. The posterior pituitary is an extension of the hypothalamus. It does not synthesize hormones but secretes two hypothalamic hormones to the blood via axon, which are the oxytocin hormone and the antidiuretic hormone we talked before. They are synthesized in the hypothalamic neurons and travel through the long hypothalamic axon that reach into the posterior pituitary and get stored in the axon ends located in the posterior pituitary until they are released into the bloodstream in response to the nervous impulses transmitted from hypothalamus. Now the antidiuretic hormone acts on distal convoluted tubules of the nephron and collecting ducts in the kidney. Now, one mistake students do when writing this target site on exams is that they write it as distal convoluted tubules and collecting ducts of the nephron in kidneys. That is definitely wrong. Why? Keep in mind that the collecting duct is not a part of the nephron. Okay, you got it? Okay, now let's move to the functions of ADH, which is stimulation of reabsorption of water by increasing permeability to water. Oxytocin acts on mammary glands as well as the uterine muscles. The Oxytocin stimulates milk ejection by stimulating contraction of smooth muscles in mammary glands, while it promotes parturition by contraction of smooth muscles in uterine muscles. The pineal gland is located in the brain. Melatonin secreted by the pineal gland is involved in the regulation of biological rhythms related to reproduction and daily activity levels. Coordination of circadian and diurnal rhythms of many tissues and inhibition of growth and development of sex organs before puberty are few functions of melatonin. So, now you might be thinking, what are the circadian and diurnal rhythms? A circadian rhythm is a natural internal process that regulates the sleep-wake cycle and repeats roughly every 24 hours. The diurnal rhythm is a biological rhythm that is synchronized with the day-night cycle. So a diurnal rhythm may or may not be a circadian rhythm. These rhythms are simply something like the biological internal clock in a human being. So you just need to keep those points in mind. So let's move on. The thyroid gland is located in the neck, just below the larynx and in front of the trachea. As you can see, it has two lobes. The thyroid gland secretes triiodothyronine, which is called as T3, thyroxine, which is called T4, and collectively these two hormones are called thyroid hormones. And thyroid gland secretes calcitonin. Now remember that thyroid gland is one gland, therefore do not write it as thyroid glands, okay? Thyroid hormones increase the basal metabolic rate and heat production, regulate the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. They are needed for normal growth and development of especially skeletal and nervous systems. They help maintain normal blood pressure, heart rate and muscle tone, and regulate digestive and reproductive functions. Calcitonin helps to lower blood calcium ion levels if it is raised above the normal limit. That is done by acting on bone cells and promoting the storage of calcium within bone tissues, and by acting on kidney tubules and inhibiting the calcium reabsorption, enhancing calcium excretion. Now we'll move to the next glands, which are the parathyroid glands. Parathyroid glands, which is a set of 4 small glands, are embedded in the posterior surface of the thyroid gland, located in the neck. 2 glands are embedded in each lobe of the thyroid gland. The thyroid glands secrete parathyroid hormones. The main function of the parathyroid hormone is to promote the high calcium levels in the blood by stimulating calcium reabsorption from the kidney tubules and calcium absorption through the small intestine. If these sources supply inadequate calcium, it acts on bone-destroying cells and promotes release of calcium from the bones into the blood. Now, you can write a short note on how blood calcium ion level is regulated in human body. Okay, let's move to the next endocrine gland, which is the thymus gland. The thymus gland is located in the upper part of the chest, directly behind the sternum and between the lungs. The thymus gland secretes the hormone thymosin. Thymosin acts on the lymphocytes originated from the stem cells in the bone marrow and regulates development and maturation of T lymphocytes, which are important components of specific immunity. The adrenal glands are paired structures, as you can see in this image, one of which lies superior to each kidney. Each gland consists of two parts, which are called the adrenal cortex, found outside the gland, and the adrenal medulla. The structure and functions of these two parts are different. Hormones secreted by adrenal glands can mediate stress responses in the body. The adrenal cortex. Okay. The hormones mainly produced by the adrenal cortex are glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. These hormones mediate long-term stress responses and participate in homeostatic regulation of metabolism. An example for a long-term stress response is rigorous exercising accompanied by strict diets for months. So, glucocorticoids have a main effect on glucose metabolism and promote glucose synthesis from non-carbohydrate sources such as protein and fat, so that more glucose is available in the blood circulation for cellular energy production. Glucocorticoids also promote the breakdown of skeletal muscle proteins for synthesis of glucose when the body requires more glucose. Cortisol is the main glucocorticoid produced by the adrenal gland. The main mineralocorticoid produced by the adrenal gland is aldosterone. Aldosterone is involved in maintaining water and electrolyte balance and stimulates the reabsorption of sodium ions by the kidney tubules and excretion of potassium ions in the urine. It is also involved in the regulation of blood volume and blood pressure. Now, why is that? As sodium reabsorption is accompanied by the water retention, blood volume and blood pressure can be increased, and that's why aldosterone involves in regulation of blood volume and blood pressure. Okay. The adrenal medulla. The hormones produced in the adrenal medulla are the adrenaline, which is also called as epinephrine, and noradrenaline, which is also known as norepinephrine. These hormones mediate short-term stress responses, which means situations like on-the-spot exams, running to catch the school bus, and so on. Upon extensive sympathetic nervous stimulation, the adrenal medulla secretes these hormones, which can potentiate the fight or flight response by increasing the heart rate and blood pressure, diverting blood to essential organs, and increasing metabolic rate. They mainly involve in increasing the availability of chemical energy for immediate use. They also promote glucose release into the circulating blood by increasing the rate of glycogen breakdown in liver and skeletal muscles. and fatty acid release from fat cells for energy production within the body. Next comes the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. Pancreas can be considered as an endocrine gland as well as an exocrine gland. It is located behind the stomach in the curve of the duodenum, as you can see in this image. The endocrine part of the pancreas is the islets of Langerhans, which are a cluster of cells scattered throughout the pancreas. These pancreatic islets mainly secrete two hormones, which are glucagon and insulin, which control the blood glucose levels by opposing actions. Alpha cells of the pancreatic islets secrete glucagon, which mainly promotes the blood glucose level increase, while beta cells of the pancreatic islets secrete insulin, which promotes lowering of blood glucose level. The main target sites of these hormones are the liver and skeletal muscles. Gonads. Paired female gonads are located in the pelvic cavity, while paired male gonads lie in the scrotum. In addition to the reproduction, ovaries and testes have endocrine functions. So let's see what these endocrine functions are. Ovarian follicle produces the hormone estrogen in females, which is also called as estradiol, while the corpus luteum, which is a structure formed after ovulation, produces progesterone. These female sex hormones, along with FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary, regulate menstrual cycle, maintain pregnancy, prepare mammary glands for lactation, and help establish and maintain feminine sexual characteristics. The ovaries also produce the hormone inhibin that inhibits secretion of FSH from anterior pituitary. In males, the main hormone produced and secreted by the testes is testosterone. Testosterone regulates production of sperm and stimulates the development and maintenance of masculine secondary sex characteristics. In addition, the testes produce inhibin that inhibits secretion of FSH. Now we can move to a major topic under this lesson, which is feedback mechanisms related to endocrine system. Variety of physiological processes in the human body, including the actions of hormones on target cells, are regulated by feedback mechanisms, like maintaining of blood calcium ion levels and blood sugar levels, which we discussed before. By now you may have understood that the feedback refers to regulation of a process by its output or end product. There are two types of feedback mechanisms related to the endocrine system, which are the negative feedback mechanism and positive feedback mechanisms. Now the feedback mechanisms which we talked before were mostly negative feedback mechanisms. So let's move on to this mechanism. Most hormonal control in the human body use negative feedback mechanisms. In here, accumulation of an end product of a process slows that process. The endocrine gland will release its hormone into the blood only when the gland is stimulated, and the response at the target site will in turn reverse or reduce the stimulus through the negative feedback. In absence of stimulation, the blood level of hormone will decrease. Some hormone levels in the blood can be directly controlled by the blood levels of stimulus. For example, insulin or glucagon by blood glucose levels. So let's take high blood glucose level regulation as an example. High blood glucose levels stimulate the release of insulin hormone from the pancreas to the circulating blood, which acts on specific target tissues to lower the blood glucose level. When glucose level in the blood reaches the normal range, blood glucose level can in turn directly control the secretion of insulin levels from the pancreas and prevent further lowering of glucose levels in the blood. Now that's it for negative feedback mechanisms. Positive feedback mechanism. A few hormone regulatory systems operate using positive feedback mechanisms. The positive feedback mechanism is a form of regulation in which an output of a process speeds up that process, thereby reinforcing or amplifying the change. Positive feedback mechanisms involve oxytocin hormone, which operate in childbirth and breast milk ejection. So let's move on to the examples. During labor, contractions of uterus are stimulated by oxytocin hormone released by the posterior pituitary. Now these contractions force the baby's head into the uterine cervix, stimulating its stretch receptors. In response to this stimulation of stretch receptors, sensory neurons are stimulated again, triggering more oxytocin release from the posterior pituitary gland, enhancing contractions of the uterus. This process repeats until the baby is born. Afterwards, oxytocin secretion stops as the stimulus, which is the stretching of the cervix, is no longer present. During suckling, sensory neurons send the nerve impulses to the posterior pituitary, triggering release of oxytocin hormone to the circulating blood. Then, oxytocin acts on the mammary glands and induces contraction of the smooth muscles in the mammary gland to release milk. Milk release increases the sensory stimulation, forming a positive feedback that amplifies the stimulus. In response to the positive feedback, more oxytocin is released, enhancing milk ejection. Afterwards, oxytocin secretion stops as the stimulus, which is suckling of mother's breast, is no longer present. Now, we've reached to the last part of this lesson, which is some endocrine disorders in humans. Diabetes mellitus, hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism are such disorders. Let's first begin with diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is a common disorder associated with insulin hormone produced by the pancreatic islets of Langerhans. Primary sign of this disorder is the increase in blood glucose levels above the normal limits. Excretion of glucose with urine, excessive production of urine, and thirst are some symptoms of diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is mainly classified into two types, as type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes was known as insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. Disorder usually appears in children and young adults. This is an autoimmune disorder caused by the destruction of beta cells of islets of Langerhans by the immune system in the body. As a result, insulin secretion is severely deficient or absent in the affected individual. Genetic factors and environmental factors are some causes for type 1 diabetes. This can be controlled by taking meals with less carbohydrates and fats, regular monitoring of blood glucose levels, and periodic insulin injections. Type 2 diabetes was known as non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus because this condition is not dependent on insulin production. In here, even though insulin is produced and secreted into blood, target cells fail to take up glucose from the blood, as you can see in this image. Hence, blood glucose levels remain elevated in the blood, but glucose may be deficient inside the body cells. The cause for this type of diabetes is multifactorial. Obesity, lack of exercise, increasing age, and genetic factors may be reasons for this type of diabetes. Now, type 2 diabetes can be controlled by consuming a diet with less carbohydrates and fats, balancing sugar intake with exercise, and taking suitable medicines. Hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. These conditions are associated with abnormal secretion of thyroid hormones T3 and T4, which may occur due to abnormal functioning of the thyroid gland and disorders of pituitary or hypothalamus. Persistence of these conditions may lead to enlargement of the thyroid gland, and this condition is normally known as goiter. Hyperthyroidism. This condition occurs due to the exposure of body tissues to excessive levels of T3 and T4. Now you can see what goiter is in this image. And furthermore, in hypothyroidism, you can see bulging of eyes, which is also known as exophthalmos. Insufficient secretion of thyroid hormones from the thyroid glands cause hypothyroidism. This can be due to lack of thyroid stimulating hormone produced by the anterior pituitary or iodine deficiency in diet. Now let's move on to the symptoms and treatments of hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. In hyperthyroidism, you can see symptoms like increased basal metabolic rate, weight loss, warm sweaty skin, diarrhea, bulging of eyes, which we saw in a previous image, and goiter. In hypothyroidism, the symptoms are the very opposite of the symptoms of hyperthyroidism. So the symptoms of hypothyroidism are low basal metabolic rate, weight gain, lethargy, dry cold skin, and constipation. Hyperthyroidism can be treated by surgical removal of a part or all of the thyroid gland and by using medicines to block thyroid hormone synthesis. Hypothyroidism is treated by increasing dietary iodine intake or oral thyroid hormone treatment. And that's the end of the lesson. So today we learned about the human endocrine system, glands related to human endocrine system, some hormones and their functions, feedback mechanisms related to the endocrine system, and some endocrine disorders in humans. Now, what should do? You should study this lesson today itself, okay? Hope this video was useful and informative for you. So thanks for watching and I wish you the very best for your upcoming exams.